So let's talk about Terry Eagleton. I mean, how does a literary critic end up becoming one of the most controversial, most talked about public intellectuals in Britain? People throw all sorts of labels at him. Class warrior, Marxist, even a radical theologian. Oh, and hypocrite, that one comes up a lot. So what's the deal? Who is this guy, and why does he get under everyone's skin?
All right, to really get a handle on Eagleton, we're not going to start at the beginning. No, that's too simple. We're going to jump right into the deep end, right into the middle of a fight. Because that's where he really seems to thrive, in the heat of a big, messy, intellectual brawl.
And boom, there you have it. That one sentence, it's just so perfectly crafted and absolutely savage. In one fell swoop, he basically dismisses the entire intellectual project of Richard Dawkins. This is pure Eagleton. It's his signature move, right? That combination of super sharp wit and just pure intellectual aggression. This is the kind of thing that instantly made people realize, okay, this guy is a serious opponent. He's not afraid to take on anyone.
So you have to ask yourself, where does a style like that come from? That kind of intellectual firepower doesn't just appear out of thin air. What are the ingredients that go into making a thinker like this? To figure that out, now we have to go back to the beginning.
And this timeline, it kind of lays out the classic story, doesn't it? It's a journey of incredible social mobility. We're talking from a working-class Irish Catholic family in Salford all the way to the most prestigious elite halls of Cambridge and then Oxford. And crucially, along the way, he's mentored by the legendary Marxist critic Raymond Williams. That right there, that's the moment that really sets the stage for everything that comes next.
Okay, so this is basically his intellectual DNA. This is the source code for everything he does. Just think about this mix for a second. You've got this working-class Irish Republican background, then you have this deep-seated radical Catholic theology. I mean, the guy was an altar boy who went on to edit a radical Catholic journal. And on top of all that, he dives headfirst into revolutionary Marxism. These three things, they're powerful, and honestly, they often seem to contradict each other. And that tension is always bubbling under the surface in his work.
All right, fast forward to 1983. This is the year Eagleton drops the book that makes him an absolute superstar, not just in academia, but way beyond it. And the whole thing was built on one single explosive idea, an idea that would completely change the game for how literature was taught for an entire generation.
I mean, just look at that number. 750,000 copies plus. Let that sink in. This is for a book about literary theory. We're not talking about a summer blockbuster novel here. This thing is a dense, academic text. The fact that it sold so unbelievably well, it just goes to show you how hungry people were for a totally new way of looking at culture.
So what was this big idea? Well, here's the core of it. Eagleton basically argued that there's no such thing as reading a book in a pure or neutral way. It just doesn't exist. Every single interpretation, every theory you use to analyze a text, he said, is political. It's always shaped by a specific ideology and a point of view, whether you realize it or not. So for him, being a critic wasn't some stuffy academic exercise. It was a political act.
But here's the thing, Eagleton wasn't content to just stick to literature. Oh no, once he had this powerful critical toolkit, he turned his attention to, well, pretty much everything. Seriously, nothing in modern culture was safe. No target was too big, no target was too small.
And this list just gives you a taste of his incredible range. I mean, look at this. He went after postmodernism, which he thought was basically politically useless. He came up with that now famous nickname for Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, Ditchkins. He got into this huge, very public spat with the novelist Martin Amis. He even went after football, calling it the new opium of the people. It's like, for Eagleton, if it's part of our culture, it's fair game.
And all of this brings us right back to the central puzzle. The big contradiction at the heart of Terry Eagleton. For a guy who spends his life attacking the establishment, his critics are always quick to point out that his own life seems, well, a little complicated.
So, how do you make sense of this? On one hand, you've got the revolutionary. He's a Marxist, a class warrior, a socialist activist. But on the other hand, look at the establishment figure. He's an Oxbridge professor. He's a guy who, as critics love to mention, owns 3 homes. He's a powerful and influential public figure in the very establishment he criticizes. This is the stuff that drives people crazy about him, but it's also what makes him so fascinating. When you boil it all down, if you really want to understand Eagleton, you have to see that his entire way of thinking is built on 2 massive, often conflicting pillars, Marxism and Christianity. Think about that. One is this super materialist philosophy, all about class struggle, economics, revolution. And the other is a religious tradition all about transcendence, morality, sin, and grace. His whole career, really, is just him wrestling with these two huge ideas. And it's right in the middle of that conflict. That's where all his most brilliant, most provocative work comes from.
So where do we land on all this? What's the final verdict on Terry Eagleton? Is he just a walking contradiction, a hypocrite preaching about revolution from the comfort of his ivory tower? Or is there another way to look at it? Maybe those contradictions are exactly what make him so important, so necessary. Maybe he's the kind of thinker we need, someone who refuses the easy answers and forces all of us to stare right at the messy, complicated realities of faith, politics, and culture. And really, that's the big question his incredible career leaves hanging in the air.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about the cultural critic Terry Eagleton and trying to answer a really big question. What does it actually mean to have hope in the world we live in today? I mean, is it just wishful thinking, or could it be something more powerful?
You know, it often feels like you're caught in a trap, right? Over here, you've got the idealist, the dreamer, who's always imagining a better world. And over there, you've got the pragmatist, the realist, who's just like, hey, let's focus on what's actually possible. But what if that's a false choice? What if you don't have to pick one?
Well, the thinker who can really help us unpack this is Terry Eagleton. Now, he's known as a Marxist literary theorist, which sounds complicated, I know, but all it really means is that he looks at things like books and culture through the lens of class and power. His whole career has been about connecting these huge ideas to our actual real political lives. And when it comes to hope, he has a brilliant way of looking at it.
So let's get right to the heart of it. Eagleton's central idea is this: not all hope is created equal. In fact, he splits the whole concept of imagining a better future into two totally different categories. Okay, first things first, let's get our terms straight. When we talk about hope for the future, we're often really talking about utopianism. And at its core, that's just a fancy word for that deep human drive to picture a society that's better than the one we've got. Simple enough. But, and this is the key, how we do that imagining, well, that changes everything.
And this is how Eagleton breaks it down. On one side, you've got what he calls good utopianism. Now, this is not about drawing up blueprints for some perfect, impossible world. It's a kind of hope that's grounded, it's realistic, it's politically aware, and most importantly, it actually pushes you to do something. It's a tool that helps you see the injustice in the here and now. But then, there's bad utopianism, and that's just pure fantasy. It's escapism that completely ignores the real-world problems of power and class. It's that kind of passive daydreaming that honestly just keeps things exactly as they are.
This really just sums it all up perfectly. Good utopianism is what Eagleton calls critical hope. It's a hope with its feet planted firmly on the ground. Bad utopianism, that's just fantasy. It's a distraction that lets us dodge the hard work of actually fighting for change.
So you might be wondering, okay, where does this powerful idea even come from? What's behind it? Let's dig into the foundational rule that gives all of Eagleton's thinking such a sharp, critical edge. This is it. This is the bedrock of his entire life's work. For Eagleton, there is just no such thing as a neutral or a purely objective idea. Every single way of looking at the world, whether it's in literature, science, you name it, is secretly shaped by some kind of underlying political belief. And here's how he says it usually works. A lot of theories try to present themselves as totally objective, right? They use all this complex jargon to seem neutral and scientific. But Eagleton argues that's usually just a mask. Hidden underneath all that are these unspoken assumptions about how the world should be. His classic book, Literary Theory and Introduction, is pretty much dedicated to pulling back that curtain and showing you the politics hiding behind the theory. And you've got to understand, for Eagleton, this was never just some abstract academic game. He absolutely practiced what he preached. He was an active member of socialist political groups, which means he was grounding his big ideas in a real-world commitment to fighting for change. For him, theory and practice were two sides of the same coin. Okay, so we've got his core rule, that all theory is political, and we've got his big idea about good hope versus bad hope. So let's see what happens when he actually applies these concepts to critique the world around us, from the halls of academia all the way to pop culture. In his book, After Theory, he takes a really hard look at the academic world itself. He basically argues that while modern theory did some amazing things, bringing crucial topics like gender and postcolonialism into the conversation, it had also kind of lost its way. It got so wrapped up in complicated ideas that it started to forget about basic ethics, about class,
and about the actual, tangible political struggles that people face every single day.
But his critique definitely doesn't stop at the university gates. He famously updated Karl Marx's old idea about religion for our time with this really provocative phrase. It's absolutely designed to make you stop and think about the role that mass entertainment plays in our society.
So how does this new opium actually work? Well, according to Eagleton, something like big-time sports can act as this massive distraction from real social injustice. It creates this huge spectacle, the championship game, the constant media coverage, that just sucks up all our energy. And it replaces genuine political engagement. You get this huge emotional release when your team wins, right? But in the real world, absolutely nothing changes. It is a perfect textbook example of what he would call a tool of bad utopianism.
So after all that, what are you supposed to do with this information? What's the big takeaway? Look, the whole point of this explainer isn't just to tell you a bunch of facts about Terry Eagleton. It's to give you a practical tool for thinking about the world and about your own sense of hope. So here it is, your very own Eagleton toolkit. First, always remember, no idea is ever truly neutral. There's always politics involved somewhere. Second, whenever you come across an idea for a better future, ask yourself, is this a critical hope that's going to push me to act? Or is it just an escapist fantasy that lets me off the hook? And finally, always question how the culture around you, the music, the shows, the sports, is shaping your ability to get involved politically. And that really just leaves us with one final question, a question for you to think about. In a world that is absolutely full of challenges, when you feel that sense of hope for something better, are you looking for an escape from the world's problems? Or are you trying to build a tool to help you change them?